Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us for Operational Excellence in Oil and Gas. My name is Nicole Bamford. I'm the moderator for today's session. On behalf of Leslie, Quinn, Candace, Grant, and I, we thank you for joining us for day one. This panel presentation, Digitalization, Preparing for the Impact of Digitalization on Your Business and Your People, will be given by Brandon Brown, Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Laredo Petroleum, Charles Osborne, Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Enable Midstream, Liz Sturman, Vice President, Technology and Innovation at Shell, and your panel moderator will be Rob Rachinsky, CEO at Engage. And their presentation promises to be well worth a listen. Before we get started, here are some quick administrative points. During the webinar, if you have questions for the presenters, please submit them in the Q&A box on your screen, and these will be answered during the question portion of the session. Likewise, for any technical issues, please write them into the Q&A box, and we'll get to them right away. The widgets on your screen can be resized and dragged around for your viewing preferences. We encourage you to visit the Resource Center on your screen for additional content and resources we and our sponsors have provided for you. So make sure you're sitting comfortably, and I'll now hand it over to Rob so we can begin.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the introductions. Yeah, exciting. I wanted to kind of kick this off, get everybody kind of thinking about this in the same frame of mind. You know, there's a lot of talk about digitization and digitalization out there in the marketplace. And what does that kind of mean? And how do we prepare our organizations for these two things? A lot of companies out there think that they are actually in process of the latter, digitalization. But what we wanted to kind of talk through today was that you may be able to take things from a paper process and digitize them, i.e. let's get them into a electronic format. However, the next step of all this is taking that data and actually having it act on each other. Pairing up these data points, whether that's coming off the edge or you're creating new data points, and actually massaging those into intelligent business decisions, you know, the BI side of your house, and turning them into ROI. So yeah, excited to kind of chat through what that looks like, and if there's folks out there that are actually, you know, taking part in this transformation. And so I think we have a really good group today. I think there's some insights that are going to be offered with our current panel here. But before, let's maybe just do some personal intros. And if you guys wouldn't mind, let me know what your first job was. I know you guys all sit in very high-ranking positions today, but what did you do first in life, and how did it lead you towards digitalization? We'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, good morning. My first job was actually working in the grocery store, bagging groceries. I worked my way up to the grocery store and started working in the back office there. And then when I was in the back office, I got a lot more familiar with the computer systems, and then eventually took a job with a company that was supporting the computer systems for the grocery stores that I worked for. So that was kind of my first job, and then kind of my first brush with the IT industry.
Oh, wow, jumped right into the technical side. That's pretty cool. How about you, Liz?
Yeah, so similarly, my first job was working at a coffee shop in my local town while I was at school, and that had nothing to do with where I am now, except for, you know, the showing that you're willing to get out there and do things and meet people and talk to people. My first real petroleum engineering job was I worked on a rig in the north of Holland, and so I don't come from the oil industry at all. I grew up in rural Derbyshire where everyone was farmers, and so going from that to being out there drilling for oil and gas when I didn't really know where it was in the ground was also quite an experience. And I think, you know, showing that you can adapt to things and be resilient and then just moving along through a variety of different roles led me to where I am now. Something totally different.
A woman after my own heart, started on the drilling side. I love that. How about you, Charles?
Yeah, good question. Similar to Brandon. First job was sacking groceries. I don't want to indicate age here, but I'll tell you that was before you had a choice for paper or plastic. I just bagged your stuff. And moved in to manage a Radio Shack. So really kind of got going in a Radio Shack store, technology innovation, and then moved from there into some IT support. So it's a little bit of lineage.
That's awesome. I'll share with you guys. I was making Dairy Queen ice cream cones, as they call the Texas stop sign. However, this was in northern Canada, the Texas of the north up in Alberta, but got really good at that little curly Q on the top, which of course dovetailed into me running a software company shortly thereafter. No, no, that's all good. Let's get started. I'm going to kind of ask a broad question of the panel here. When you guys are looking at DX and that transformation within your own shop, what are what are the main KPIs that you look at when you want to attribute success to bringing in a new technology? Who wants to go first?
This is Brandon. This is Brandon. I'll go first. We're at the early stages of our digital transformation, and now there's several KPIs that are important to us. One is how are we co-locating our data, and are we getting all of our data to the new data lake is first and foremost. We feel like that's really foundational to our digital transformation, is having our data co-located. Second to that would be what type of efficiencies are we adding to the organization and across the organization through technology like RPA. And then really the most important KPI that I think of when we think about digital transformation is how is the technology impacting revenue from a positive standpoint or reducing risk across the organization. And for us in our digital transformation, the reason we are investing in that is so we can improve the decision quality across the company, and those improved decisions should transfer to revenue.
So it sounds like it's all surrounding sort of the business intelligence that you guys as the IT group can provide to the different business assets and then throughout your organization. Yeah, I think we're kind of hearing that a lot. I know, Brandon, do you guys actually structure some of that into your contracts on the front end, if possible?
No, we have not thus far. Great idea, though. Keep that in mind. But yeah, so far we've not structured that into the idea or into the contracts. We have agreed with our senior leadership team to not move to additional phases of project until we have proved out the ROI from the previous phase. And that's currently where we're at now with one of our larger projects. We're about to go through the first gate from phase 1 to phase 2. And in that gate process, we're going to make sure we show back that we actually have delivered on the return or have delivered on the investment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that line of thinking. I think you have to put pressure on the technology providers to help you with that. I know within our own shop over here, we do have a dedicated data science team on the contracts, and I think it's just so paramount for both parties. It not only helps you guys obviously tell that story to your leadership, but also on the flip side for those disruptors. Helps them go to market and really gives them a succinct talk track on what their technology is doing for the corporation. So I can appreciate that. How about Liz or Charles? Any KPIs that you guys sort of baseline success with?
Yeah, so thanks, Rob. Yeah, totally agree with what Brandon is saying. I would say, building on the topic that you were just talking about on value, what we have seen in the past is that, it's easy to get carried away with the, solving world hunger type of approach. And so it's very good to have a step approach. And so get to the first proof of concept, check that that's adding value before you move on to the other big things. And so that, again, for us is a very, very important, a structured way of really showing that we're adding value with everything we're doing rather than a many-year-long program, which isn't doing that. And I think the second thing, I would totally agree with Brandon where he started on data, right? So if you don't have the data in databases where people can easily access it, then we are not going to be going fast with making digital products. And so one of the key KPIs for us as well is really the usage reports on these things. So when we've developed things, how many people are using them? When we've put data in databases, how many people are actually getting the data out of those databases rather than going back to the spreadsheets they may have in their bottom drawers. And so really building on those foundations in order to help us to move faster in the future.
Right. And I guess then the third step on all of that would be what business decisions that surrounded that data actually changed the trajectory of where you guys were headed. So I can appreciate that. I mean, there's just so much cleanup that has to be done, especially depending on to Brandon's point, where your organization is in the transformation of actually getting this into a structured data lake or somewhere where it's usable by all parties, right? So
yeah. No, absolutely. Just one, I guess the last thing to say is, for us, it almost goes the other way. It's not the third step. Maybe I should have said that first, right? The first question is, what are the business problems you're trying to solve? And let's fix the data for that first, rather than first fixing the data and then working out what we're going to solve. So it's really being very clear that the digital effort is really tied to the issues of the business and the bottom line of the business, rather than the other way around.
How often do you guys find that when you know, obviously you structure that on the front end, but when you get into sort of the nuts and bolts of a new technology, that you uncover possible solutions or new business cases for rolling that out for that current project, or even maybe to other organizations within your own corporation?
Yeah, so that's one of the big focus areas, right? Once you've got something that works, how can you roll it out elsewhere? And so I think some of the examples where we're seeing that work is especially in artificial intelligence. And so we had a very successful predictive maintenance program that started off in our refineries that we then were very quickly able to replicate across into our deep water assets. And so it's really being able to spot those connections, right? So if you've got a piece of code, then how can you, just because you wrote the code for one application, it doesn't mean you can't then go and use it for other applications. And so the question is then, how do you make sure that everybody knows about that so that we're not reinventing the wheel? But it's a great point.
Yeah, I think that I'll kind of move into my next question with Chuck on that. You know, with respect to that, are you guys getting together as a community, or do you guys roll out initiatives that foster sort of a culture of digital transformation at Enable, Charles, or is there like a central group or a central hub that people are talking about these initiatives? Because I think, to Liz's point, it's especially within an organization as large as Shell, is how do you get it from this happening offshore Nigeria to this happening onshore in the Permian or what have you? Do you guys at Enable do anything that's sort of a controlled space, I guess?
Yeah, we've had a couple of intentional efforts here in the last 12 months. And, you know, what's interesting about this concept is it doesn't necessarily scale with the size of the company or the parts of the world you operate in. It's just that, how are you going to do things different tomorrow than you've done them in the past? That same change management perspective of adopting a new way exists really despite size of company. So to try to get past that, one of the things we did last year was created an innovation team. And so it was a cross-functional team. It wasn't technology focused. IT participated, but we were just one of many. The small group of people reported to senior leadership team, and their charge was, what are those step level things we can do as a company, right? So I love that they didn't use the language that we try to kind of impose about digitalization and digital. It was just, if we want to be operationally, financially, and commercially excellent, what does that mean to us? Where are our opportunities? Within the first 90 days, it was kind of neat to see some of the things that team reported out were technology solutions, but they started to identify, you know, where do they have manual data entry? Where do we capture information? And we're a field-based company, right? So where's someone driving out to a field location, capturing a data value on paper, bringing that back to enter it somewhere? So they were coming up with these ways that we can reduce man hours to accomplish something, reduce data errors because we're not recording at the point of collection. So while it wasn't this technology influence thing, they were able to immediately put on paper those business opportunities where they've got opportunity to be more efficient or faster time to market or make better decisions. So kind of this innovation team is one we're going to carry forward. Two is we created a digital champions team. So who are those early adopters that are innovative and trying to find new ways of doing, managing their business daily? And we communicate with that smaller group of people more frequently. Here's an upgrade, here's a capability, here's robotic process automation, data literacy. So we try to bring them a little bit more. That way they can go back into their homerooms and be champions of what those opportunities look like. Reality is, though, those people are going to scale in their business faster than IT teams can anyway. And then final one, Rob, is we're a big user of Teams. And so we've got this Teams channel where we try to celebrate wins, and we just really try to highlight those business innovation ideas in their voice, telling the company, here's how they've reduced reduce time gathering data to where they can analyze data, or reduce cost or predictive maintenance. It's just been really successful for them to tell those stories, which then leads to the next, opportunity out there that maybe we didn't know, gives them a chance and a communication channel to start letting us know, hey, that same thing we did for that team could benefit us over here. So it creates this opportunity kind of map and windows is the way we refer to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we're all kind of in the first inning. I think that's a great approach. What I like to hear too is when companies are taking that to the next step, and you guys will have your overarching KPIs and corporate goals for the masses, if you will, and how does a group like that actually affect those corporate goals that inherently affect everybody's bonuses and everybody's pay structure within the organization? Because I think if you can get it highlighted to that level, I think you get a lot more support and maybe trying out new technologies and maybe pushing the envelope a little bit. So that's great to hear, Chuck. I think if companies do not have that department or sort of that line of sight, then they need to move towards it for sure. That we got asked through the audience questionnaire, and it was actually on our docket here. And I'm going to push this one back at Liz. And you mentioned teams there, Chuck. You guys, how does the COVID transform the way that you implement new technologies, and what type of approach are you guys taking that might be a little bit different than maybe going into 2020?
Yeah, so I think could totally hear what Chuck is saying about the use of Teams. I think all of us, we've been forced to work at home, to work virtually, and we've shown that a lot of things could work thanks to the great IT networks that our IT colleagues have managed to put in place. I think the other thing that really stood out as we went into COVID is we had to really think about our offshore operations. And so I'm primarily involved with the deep water operations across GEL. We had restrictions on the number of people that were able to get out to the platforms, and we had restrictions then on how we could do work. And what we found was through a combination of the digital communications that we had available to us, but also some of the technologies that we'd started to introduce, that the guys and girls who could get out to the platforms were able to really push forward with these kind of technologies. And we did a lot of stuff that we hadn't thought was possible before, especially in the areas of inspections. And so really using digital technologies, the connected worker, iPad technology, and all of these things to get the expertise out to the people who are on the platform without physically having to fly out there. We also found that it was easier for us to continue our program of getting the front line to drive things, because it was no longer really possible for the office-based management to get out to the platforms. And so the front line found they had a lot more time to really get involved with things. And so they were able to fully capitalize on all that digital stuff that we got out there. As I mentioned before, the predictive maintenance helped us to make sure we were focusing in the right place when we potentially had less people out on the platforms to do things. And so altogether, it's really helped us to accelerate quite a lot of that journey. And we do plan to carry on with that as we go forward into 2021.
Yeah, I would comment too. I think as we're seeing and we're hearing a lot more of that is sort of retooling that front line. And if there was fear in the system sort of prior to, this, what we've seen in 2020, I think a lot of that has been eradicated by the fact that this just has to happen. And maybe a lot of folks that were not using it on a day-to-day basis is simple things like a Zoom or a Teams, I think have changed people's mentality. And so, that's great to hear. I think there is a lot more people putting their hand up to become champions and embrace sort of the new technologies, especially on the front lines. And those folks are usually, it's the hardest to change their minds, but they really do drive the success of those implementations. So if you're able to do so as an organization, I think it dovetails into just broader and more of a, it spreads a little bit quicker throughout the ecosystem. So I had Brandon or Chuck, do you guys have any comments? Have you guys seen sort of a market change in the way that you guys look to deploy? I know you said, Brandon, you're sort of in early stages, but is there anything that you guys can point out within your organizations?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about teams. For us, we had teams rolled out, but really hadn't rolled out an adoption strategy along with that just yet. So we kind of took the stance of never let a crisis go to waste, right? So we took advantage of COVID where we could, rolled a very accelerated program out for teams along with training that was available for every employee. And on top of that, we provided small burst of training information from IT. So every 2 weeks, we hosted an IT training course on Teams. Actually, those caught on pretty well. We're actually we are still providing those of the topics, not always just Teams. We surveyed the employees and tried to make sure we're addressing their issues through that training program. And then also, a lot like Charles, we used technical champions across the organization that became the kind of the gateway between IT and the business. So instead of us having to deal with every employee, we worked with those technical champions to make sure we had the issues for those organizations resolved. Teams has now really become the main platform we use for collaboration. We were kind of kidding around the other day, and before COVID, we might not have always opened Teams, and now it's probably the first thing we open, probably even more so now than Outlook.
Yeah, that kind of leads me, and I'll point this one back at Chuck. But you mentioned that you're putting champion hats on throughout sort of your organization there, Brandon. I guess, guys, DX has the impact. It will impact so many different pieces of your business and your operations, and it's really driving departments to collaborate in these days and times. Outside of Teams, I feel like with a lot of these IT projects, there needs to be a lot more collaboration. So I guess my question is, what groups are you seeing drive DX, and is it resulting in a more cross-functional collaboration between organizations that maybe were not collaborating before? I.e., Liz is calling out a lot of her maintenance group with the IT group, or ... And what are those lessons learned? Are there any that you guys can kind of call out where you're seeing new collaborations within your organizations? I'll start with you, Chuck.
Yeah, sure. Good question, because it's always, you're always trying to think, what's that go-to-market strategy that's going to help this, any particular thing. I'd tie back even to key performance indicators for digital. You'd love to know what's that one KPI across my company that's going to drive all behaviors. Reality is frontline departments and teams are facing their own challenge in their day. So we tried to think through, how do we approach a KPI that team levels could adopt? So if you think % paperless, % part of your job that you can do mobilely and not have to drive back to an office. If we deconstruct a KPI to team level thing, and then create kind of products that fit that, then hopefully those will just take off. So if you think about conversations on digital are just hard for them to understand. What does it mean? What do they need to have to be ready? If you try to go and your field employee have that conversation, it just kind of takes one life. If you go out and you say, look, as a company, we're trying to have less paper. We want you to be able to do your job from any location. Here's the way we can help you create your paper to electronic, create workflow on that approval, create a mobile form for data capture on that. Just these simple things. Where can you apply these in your business? That conversation immediately then ties back to their business problem in their day. So we try to kind of deconstruct those a little bit more in kind of a product mindset, just so they can get life of their own and be applied to real life problems in a faster way than having this big corporate rollout kind of process.
Liz or Brandon, any opportunity to pile on there?
Yeah, sure. I think for us, that's definitely the way that we go as well. And so what we know is that the business on the front line, they know what the issues are, they know what the problems are, and they know where the opportunities are to improve. And so to put that together with an IT capability that can help to make the solutions together is really the one that's worked the best for us. And so typically for every digital opportunity we have what we call a business owner, which is then the person who's in the business doing the job, who can really say, yes, this is my problem, this is what I want you to help me to sort out, and then to work together with the people in the IT function who've got maybe the coding or the IT architecture skills and the data background to do that. That really works the best for us. And so that's, I think of the three of us here on the call as well. So I am a petroleum engineer. I'm not an IT expert. And so that's just another example of how we put those two things together to come up with the answer. I think it's something that's been going on for a long time. And over the last couple of years, we've really tried to focus on that partnership, right? So that we can make sure that the things we are creating are really the products that are going to really help help the front line and help the results of the business.
We had a comment here from the audience. It says, there's no such thing as an IT project. Brandon, you'll like this. Projects are about business change. Use of some IT may help advance the desired business change, but the focus of the project must be on the business change that is desired. And I know, Brandon, you and I, previous to this, talked a little bit about that, that IT is becoming a profit center. Can you kind of expand on your thoughts surrounding, I think, what Scott Marley is getting at here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think we touched on this just a little earlier in the conversation as far as KPIs go. And it's not so much that IT becomes a profit center, even though there are some opportunities for that. What's more important is that IT is adding value to the business. That's value that the business sees and understands, and it is a measurable outcome, right? The way we like to look at it is, how are we positively impacting revenue one way or another? We have to be impacting that. The old school IT stuff, right? So the infrastructure side of things, it's really a commodity. It does add value to the business, but not in a way that the digital transformation side can. So we're trying to reduce our overall technical burden, if you will, on the infrastructure side of IT, and trying to automate as much as we can there, so we free our resources up to work on the project, the business project that drive revenue.
I think that jumps into it. There's another good question. Larry Paul from Dow Chemical asked the group, would you say your digital transformation, the transformations within your organization are providing more data, or are they organizing and disseminating existing data for the betterment of the whole corporation? And I can kind of further that question a little bit. How are your corporations sort of preparing for a massive push to organize the use of all this data across your structure? I always use an example from my side of the house, which is always trying to get SLAs and some of these security documents signed off on. I do find that depending on the organization, however, that the legal teams are not even prepared for what's coming at them right now. You may get, one SLA that's redlined that takes hours, if not months, half a year to go through, and then that same SLA will come back with almost nothing redlined on it. And I say that because maybe those legal teams aren't really ready for this transformation either. So what are you guys doing as leaders within your companies to prepare your organization for the use and sharing of all this data, not only from a standpoint of the ecosystem and the general, I guess we'll call it, between you and your providers, but also within your companies and the sharing within your company? Anything specific?
Yeah, so maybe I can go first. If you talk about, so I think the first question was, what are you doing? Are you actually getting more data from this, or is it making sense of the data? And I think for us, the digitalization program itself is not collecting data. I mean, the business itself is hugely busy collecting data already. So, I mean, just for us, within Shell, we've got 1.1 trillion rows of curated sensor data just to do with the predictive maintenance that I talked about earlier. And we're handling 400 gigabytes of data every month and cover more than 70 petabytes of storage. And so the issue is not that we've got the data. What we're trying to do is to use this digitalization program, so to use artificial intelligence and other machine learning in order to make sense of it for people. Because obviously, as humans, we cannot possibly get through that amount of data. What we want to do is to use machines and computers to make sense of it for us so that we can take the right action on the front line to make money from it. And so, I think the idea is we're not creating data, we're creating sense out of the data so that our people can use their skills then to do something about it.
Gentlemen, are you guys seeing similar, like within the technologies that you guys are procuring? Is that sort of the mantra?
Wow, I love it.
Go ahead, Charles.
I just say I love what you're saying about the business. Data's being created by everything, every new technology. Even I think about COVID, right? We've got this remote check-in to work app that's created an insight and data that we didn't know was out there. So the data's kind of coming. We just really want to push, education out as far into the business as we can. Here's the information you have. Here's how to use technologies to get more insights and decisionable intelligence out of that data. What information is available to you that may not be within your kind of department or silo. So publish more of that quality data that they can mesh in with information that they may already have. Really just try to get the traditional IT out of it, right? We don't want to be the only people with that knowledge or accessibility. We got to push that as far out as we can.
There's a comment made, I think, that sort of piles on there. It's about staying open-minded with respect to these technologies. And I think sometimes when you bring them into your house, you may have an idea of what they're going to do or what data they're going to transform. And then once you sort of unwrap the package, you realize that you may be touching on a lot of other business units or a lot of other workflows that also need to be digitized. And I think we all need to be cognizant that we really push that out, right, to the general. I do hear that, though. It's really exasperated and accelerated a lot of that. And you mentioned just that simple data point of people checking in, but there's so much of that, right, as you unpack these new technologies. So no, that's great to hear. Got a question for Brandon here. Last time we spoke, again, I want to kind of get back into this, seeing IT transform a little bit. I really like that conversation. How are you guys seeing your IT departments transform? I know we talked about, yes, embedding some of these KPIs and looking at this as a possible profit center, but are you guys seeing your organizations grow? Or are you guys seeing the way that you are going to structure them in the future change? Are you guys bringing in-house developers in, API developers, this sort of thing? What's changing in your worlds as far as the structure of your business goes?
Yeah, Rob, very good question. And yes, all the things you mentioned are changing, but really the most important part, I think, of digital transformation or the changes that are taking place with kind of the new IT really is the relationship with the business. We've had a relationship with the business in the past, but that relationship, because of technology, has changed quite a bit, I think, over the past 12 to 18 months. And in fact, some of my favorite work is when we have developers in pickup trucks with police operators driving around to solve problems that are taking place right then. And through that agile approach, we're now able to deliver solutions to the field much faster than IT was, 12 and 18 months ago. And because we can deliver those insights or those solutions at a much faster pace than we could in the past, that really helps foster that relationship with those guys in the field much faster. They also feel like they have a significant amount of input into what it is we're creating for them. So the change management side is also reduced because they feel like they're part of the solution. And then I'd also add that if you're building solutions that require a massive change management program, I would probably go back and question the technology. Technology has to work like it does in our personal space with our personal devices, right? You don't get an instruction manual to use Uber nowadays. It's intuitive enough that you understand how to use it, and that's really the direction we should be headed as IT departments are creating technology.
Chuck, any change to the structure of your department?
Maybe similar to what Brandon was saying, but if we think about the pace of technology adoption, the pace of digital transformation, the reality is that needs to happen faster than a traditional model where the IT department skills up, knows the solution, builds something, goes to market. So what I would say, engagement and inclusion of knowledge-skilled third-party partners earlier, and not even earlier, but just as a primary delivery pattern is something that changes going forward, right? If we want to create, for us, we created a commercial business opportunity tracker. We found a partner that could do something we'd never done, and we scaled up with that partner as long as we delivered that value. So it creates business engagement. It creates skill on the technical team and the business team while you're delivering business value. I think that's kind of a pattern that we'll see more in the future, is find those people that have that skill and you develop along the way as you're creating that value.
Yeah, I love that entire talk track. I mean, some of the struggles we have as a supplier of new technology is just working with the team on the other side, and maybe they don't, they're in the first inning of their transformation, and they haven't really identified that they need a API developer to help decode or decouple, what we're sending over as a provider. And so I really look forward to the industry sort of shifting in that direction, and we become integrated partners with our technology providers versus this is something that we buy off the shelf like a legacy, Oracle or an SAP that requires Deloitte or McKinsey to get involved. If we can bring a little bit of that in-house, I think that these transformations will speed up. And so no, I hear that. I think with that, guys, we're kind of getting close to the finishing mark here. Thank you so much for the insights. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you so much, Brandon. I think there was some great conversation today, and please open up our networks, guys. Get in and find these folks on LinkedIn. I'm sure they can help you in your transformations as well. So with that, everybody stay safe and have a good day.
Thanks so much, Rob, and as well to Brandon, Charles, and Liz for your interesting and informative panel discussion. For those in the audience who'd like to listen again, this webinar will be available on demand shortly. And thank you to you, wherever you are, for taking the time to listen in. We look forward to having you on the next session starting in just a few moments.